in salaries through arts districts, over 16,000 full-time equivalent jobs, over 50 million in revenue raised in in-state local taxes, and so there's a combined total economic impact of over $1.3 billion, right, from just the arts districts in Maryland. This also talks about the number of visitors in those arts districts, right? So you'll see that there's been over 8.1 million people who have visited these arts districts. And of those 8.1 million, there's been over 500 million who attended free events. And also there's been over $400 million in visitor spending. Okay. Yeah, y'all ain't know. Us artists be making it happen. All right. So now let's talk a bit about the arts districts here locally. First, you have Station North, right? So Station North, if you look at the map, it's a bit cut off, but if you look at the map, it sort of starts on the perimeter of Greenmount, and it goes down to Oliver Street and up to 36th Street, and then it sort of travels west all the way down to Maryland Avenue, and sort of wraps back around. It excludes, if you can see up there, the district office for Baltimore City Schools and the train station, but it pretty much encompasses everything else in that area. So it was created in 2002, and it encompasses, again, Charles North communities, Greenmount West community, and the Barclay neighborhoods. Some of the notable attractions include the Motor House, Impact Hub, Open Works, Graffiti Alley, Why Not Lot, City Arts Apartments 1 and 2, and it also coincides with Artscape. Okay, so the next arts district I want to talk about is actually the largest one in the state of Maryland, and it was established in 2003, and this is the Highlandtown Arts District, right? So if you look at this map, it's very much so expansive, including a whole lot of Patterson Park. It goes down to Canton, parts of Greektown, and etc. So it's a very, very expansive arts district. And again, like I said, it encompasses Highlandtown, Patterson Park, portions of Canton, and Greektown. Some of its notable attractions, I really only found one notable attraction that I feel like people generally know about, and that's Creative Alliance. But they also highlight some other places like the Crown Industrial Park and the Monument City Brewing Company, as well as a host of other very small galleries and taverns and art studios that have popped up since the creation in 2003. The next one is called, again, the Bromo Arts District, right? This is the area that Kurt Schmoke was trying to develop in the late 90s, right? And so here's a map of the Bromo Arts District, right? You'll see it's sort of west downtown, goes up, intersects with Mulberry Street, Franklin, you have Howard Street, Madison, right? Center Street. It was actually created a lot later than the first two. It was created in 2012, and some of its notable attractions include Arena Players, the Bromo Salsa Arts Tower, the Downtown Cultural Arts Center, the Hippodrome Theater, Lexington Market, go figure that, Royal Farms Arena, Everyman's Theater, and the U.B. Blake Center. All right, so let me go back for a second. So these are the three arts districts here in Baltimore, right? But what is interesting to note is that some arts districts are created through public policy making and in connection with government, whereas other arts districts can occur a lot more organically, right? It comes out of the community, out of people just producing art collectively in a space, creating institutions in a space, and it may not ever be recognized as an arts district, or if those people can mobilize and get together with government, then those kinds of places become arts and entertainment districts as well. I say that because now I want to talk about what is, in my opinion, Baltimore's only authentic arts district. Meaning, again, as I previously noted, it grew out of community. It was not something that a group of developers looked at and said, this is a place where we can revitalize and bring tourists or bring folks from outside of the state, right? It was an intentional effort that was built out of the folks who live there. And this is along the Pennsylvania Avenue corridor, all right? So I want to go ahead and talk about some of the reasons why I think this would be a prime location for a Black arts district because of its history. All right, so first, this is a picture of the Royal Theater, right? This was located 1329 Pennsylvania Avenue in Baltimore, and it was first opened in 1922. But does anybody know the original name of the Royal Theater? Oh, I heard somebody say it. What'd you say? Yes, it was actually called the Douglas Theater originally, and they renamed the Royal Theater. It was an extremely famous theater in West Baltimore, and there was actually a circuit of really prominent theaters in major cities. And so the Royal Theater was held to the likes of the Apollo, the Howard Theater in DC, the Regal Theater in Chicago, and the Earl Theater in Philadelphia, right? So this was not a small-town theater, but it was actually one of the largest marvels for Black theaters in the United States, all right? Currently, in the space where the Royal Theater used to be, there's a commemorative Royal Theater Marquee monument, which was created by the Pennsylvania Avenue Redevelopment Collaborative and other organizations in 2004. It was designed to be the first phase of a series of restorative projects along Pennsylvania Avenue, but it took over 7 years to erect, and then the rest of those projects just never manifested. The next place that I want to highlight is the Sphinx Club, right? This was founded by Charles Philip Tillman as one of the first African-American owned nightclubs in the country, right? And that was on Pennsylvania Avenue. He ran the Sphinx until he died in 1988, and then it officially closed down in 1992. Now that was surprising because I was actually alive in 92, and I'm like, I never hear anybody talking about this place. All right, so unfortunately, this is all that's left of the Sphinx Club. There's no plaque or any kind of historical markers that would lead you to believe that this was the site of the country's one of the country's first clubs for African Americans. It was proposed to be a site a few years back for a museum about the Negro League for baseball. But that, again, never came to fruition, so it just sits as a vacant building. The next place that I want to highlight is the Regent Theater, which was created in 1916 by Louis Hornstein and his two sons. It was advertised as, I thought this was so hilarious, it was advertised as the largest, coolest, best ventilated house in the city. It was later converted to an actual movie theater rather than a traditional theater house. It actually sat where currently Shake and Bake is. So that's the site of that old theater. The next place is actually still standing, right? So who knows what this place is?
Art Social Club.
Yes, right? So this is the Art Social Club, created by Raymond A. Coates and Jeremiah S. Hill, as well as Sam L. Barney. It was founded in 1912 and is the nation's oldest and continuously running Black male social club. So we got a lot of firsts in Baltimore. And this is actually a current picture. We couldn't find a picture of its old facade, so this is what it looks like today. The last place that I want to highlight is the Met Theater, the Metropolitan movie house. It was first white-owned, right? And this is on the corner of Penn North. It was first white-owned. Then Warner Brothers bought it out, and because they wanted to show their new big pictures in Baltimore. And then, in about 10 years' time, Warner Brothers sold it to some Black folks in Baltimore, and it became one of the first Black-owned movie houses here in Baltimore. But there's no evidence that this place used to exist because now it is just the Penn North subway station. Yep, so you'd never know. All right, and then, you know, through all of the places that we talked about, the theaters, the clubs, and etc., you had a number of famous people who came through Baltimore. And I think an interesting thing to note is during that time, if you were a famous black musician or you were an actor or what have you, there were very few places that you could go and perform for your own people. Typically, right, you could perform, go through the back segregated door, sit in the segregated section until it was your time to perform, and then you could perform for an audience of white folks. But there was sort of this underground circle of black places where you could perform for black people called the Chitlin Circuit, and Pennsylvania Avenue was our stop on the Chitlin Circuit. So there were so many people that came through the Chitlin Circuit, like Billie Holiday, Louis Armstrong, and Cab Calloway, and countless others. And so I just wanted to sort of, pay homage to all the folks that came through Baltimore. This is actually a clip from a documentary that was created by Channel 2 called The Soul of Baltimore. It's about Walter P. Carter, if you want to look it up. It's about a 30-minute documentary. Walter P. Carter is the father of former Delegate Jill Carter, who is currently the director of the Office of Civil Rights and Wage Enforcement. Walter Carter led the Baltimore chapter of CORE, the Congress for Racial Equality. He helped to integrate the Gwynn Oaks apartment and was also a Maryland organizer for the March on Washington, right? So this is a documentary that was about him, but I'm going to play a small clip because he actually talks about Pennsylvania Avenue, and there's some footage of Pennsylvania Avenue.
Which has been rejected by a large segment of society, but has not rejected itself. Some call it Pensy, some Death Valley, some the Mecca. Its formal title is Pennsylvania Avenue, Baltimore, a 2.5 mile ribbon of light, and depression, stretching from the core of Baltimore City northwest to Druid Hill Park. Before World War II, Pennsylvania Avenue was the visible hub of Negro life and activity in Baltimore, because downtown was more or less off limits to Negroes. Pennsylvania Avenue became the bustling center of the black man's working life and leisure hours. After the war, however, much of the Negro middle class moved out of the area, and businessmen along the avenue, most of them white, began to complain of a decline in sales. South of North Avenue, stores closed, theaters became movie houses, and many jazz clubs either shut their doors or became bars with jukeboxes instead of live bands. Residences along Pennsylvania Avenue became the exclusive home of poor Negroes with incomes averaging $3,750 for a family of 5. Between 1950 and 1960, the area's population declined by 20%. More and more, the word slum was used to describe what was once a reasonable, healthy community. Few dared to venture into the area at night. So bad was Pensy's reputation as a breeding ground for crime, prostitution, and drug addiction. Pennsylvania Avenue as a viable community has not died. It has deteriorated physically, but spiritually, it has become a rallying point for the black man trying to find a sense of identity in the hostile, impersonal world of the 1960s.
Right. So, unfortunately now, what is most talked about when you mention Pennsylvania Avenue or Penn North is that it was the epicenter for the Baltimore Uprising, right? Pennsylvania Avenue is a shell of what it used to be, as was talked about in the documentary. I think that this sort of fall of Pennsylvania Avenue was caused in large part by two major phenomena, which I want to talk about next, okay? So the first thing that I want to talk about is integration. Now I know that many folks are going to say, well, integration was a huge leap forward for the civil rights movement. And I think that that is true. But in many ways, I don't think that we could have imagined the negative effects it could have on black communities. So integration integration, I think when I say it had a negative effect on Black communities, it created a stagnant economic created stagnant economic progress in the Black community. Because before integration, we had these mom and pop shops. We had all of these places that were exclusively for Black people, where you only had Black patrons, and it was because there was nowhere else you could go, right? So there was this intrinsic local business model where Black folks were supporting Black folks. And on this picture here, you'll see a sign that reads, "Do not buy where you will not be hired." And that was a part of the "Don't Buy Where You Can't Work" campaign across major cities in the United States. And I think that that's indicative of the mindset that Black folks had before integration, and even directly after integration. But there were so many folks that felt like, oh, I have arrived. Now I can go to any institution, anybody will take my money, and I'm seen as more prominent or more well-to-do if I can buy from a white establishment, and that led to the decline of a lot of Black businesses. America also has never fully integrated its society. Why do I say that? Because Black folks were encouraged to join the fold and support those white businesses, but white folks were never encouraged to do the same and go support Black businesses, right? Or any other businesses for people of color, for that matter, right? So it was a very lopsided idea of integration. It was really that Black folks had the opportunity to shop elsewhere, but never an encouragement for us to, sort of coalesce and support each other in the nation. So again, this has left many would-be Black entrepreneurs and businesses out of the economic loop, okay? The next thing that I want to talk about is white flight and economic decline in Baltimore, right? And so in the 1950s, Baltimore was facing economic decline. And there was also this boom of the suburbs, right? Because the highways and expressways were being created, and there was an encouragement for white folks to get out of the city, right? And so they started to flee Baltimore and go out to the suburbs. Between 1950 and 1960, some 45,000 people left Baltimore to go to the suburbs. And many of those people who were shopping in the downtown districts and etc. took those businesses with them, okay? So this left Baltimore in a really unique place. In addition to that, a lot of Baltimoreans were forced to move, right? In the city, there was a rate of demolition that rose to 600 houses a year in that same time period, and actually about to 800 houses a year by the time we get to the 60s. That number reached 2,600 per annum in the late 60s, as sites were cleared for, again, new expressways and new schools and new housing projects, right? And so this really affected Black communities, right? Especially like Upton and other communities. Because Black folks and poor folks were disproportionately affected because of blockbusting, right? And other things. But blockbusting is essentially when investors would see that white folks are fleeing, so they would buy their houses for cheap and then sell those same houses for an exorbitant amount to Black folks, right? And it sort of created these concentrated communities that were impoverished and full of Black folks, right? Emerson Village is an example. All right? So, here is a picture of then Mayor Schaefer and James Rouse, right? Because in response to the economic decline of the time, they were trying to figure out a way to reinvigorate the city, right? And so what they did was they sort of outsourced to two organizations to figure out what they should do. And so here's a picture of them looking at the first model for the revitalization of what is now Harbor Place. In 1958, the Greater Baltimore Committee, which is a regional organization of business leaders in cooperation with city government, right? They unveiled a report to transform downtown Baltimore, which is the harbor, right? But in order to implement that plan, they connected with an organization called the Baltimore Development Corporation. No, I'm sorry. They connected with an organization called the Charles Center Management Corporation, which, after their success of creating Charles Center, then attached the Inner Harbor to that name. So it was the Charles Center Management Corporation and Inner Harbor Corporation. And then, once they successfully built the Inner Harbor, they are now known as the Baltimore Development Corporation. And that's interesting to note because these two organizations that are highlighted here basically determine all large-scale development in Baltimore today, right? So this is the history of those organizations. And what you need to understand is these are like quasi-government agencies, right? So they're private, but they also are connected and accountable to the government. And the decisions that they make largely affect what the government chooses to back, right? And these organizations, starting in 1958, but all the way till recent, had a vision to bolster downtown, right, instead of communities outside of the downtown region, right? So it's really important to note that. Okay, so in 1962, there was the construction of One Charles Center. Okay, this is located between Center Plaza and Charles Street, right? Using federal urban renewal funds, the city demolished most of the places that were around what is now considered the Harbor Place. And so, to give you an idea, there weren't any restaurants, there weren't any tourist attraction kind of places. There were really just oyster packing plants. Those are the kind of places that were around there, and docks, right? So they demolished everything that was around there to create what we now know as Harbor Place. A new infrastructure of piers and bulkheads and roads, utilities, and etc., and then that promenade, right? And so there was also the creation of the World Trade Center in 1973. These two guys, I just wanted to put this out there, are the current presidents of the GBC and the BDC, right? And so that's Donald Fry and Bill Cole, right? So they're still making decisions for the city now, just in case you wanted to know it. All right. So, year by year, the Inner Harbor was sculpted, right? So this was not something that happened overnight. In fact, when it was originally written, it was written as a 30-year plan. So there was an intentional effort for the city to only focus on this particular region for several decades. And that plan just continued to increase. And it went from 30 to 50 years and etc., right? Some of the things that came to fruition was the National Aquarium, the power plant, the gallery, the Hyatt Regency Hotel, the Maryland Science Center, Harbor Court Apartments, and the hotel, Harbor Place, etc., the Baltimore Visitor Center, etc., right? I thought this was so interesting. In 1981, which was the first year of the actual Harbor Place, there were more tourists in Baltimore than Disneyland. Why would that many people want to come to Baltimore? I'm just saying. But it just shows how much of an intentional effort and the marketing and everything that went into redesigning that downtown region and getting more folks into Baltimore. All right. The impact of the development of downtown, in my opinion, was a clear trade-off in community development, right? Because those quasi-governmental agencies decided that downtown was more important than other communities that also could have been used to bring in tourists to Baltimore, right? And I think that it had a deep impact and caused deep disinvestment in communities like Upton and the Pennsylvania Avenue corridor, okay? Now, although we've talked about Pennsylvania Avenue as a shell of what it used to be, and we've talked about the history that's led to this moment, and we've talked about the deep disinvestment in the community, and we've talked about the crime and the uprising and all of that, despite all of those facts, I still see Pennsylvania Avenue in its current state as a viable place for this grassroots initiative to create a Black Arts District. I still think it's the best place for it. And so I want to talk a little bit about why and hopefully get you all on board to help us out in that endeavor, okay? All right. So, first and foremost, you can't see the top of the slide, but I think that a lot of folks have talked about a black arts district or the idea of a black arts district as a symbolic gesture, right? That it would make people feel good. Even though they do not say that when you talk about Station North or the Roma Arts District or the Highlandtown Arts District. But I guess it's because something about black folks and self-determination just seems symbolic, right? I want to give a few reasons why I think it's far more practical than symbolic and can actually radicalize the way we look at economic development, particularly in communities of color. Okay? So the first thing is, I think it can serve as an anti-gentrification economic framework, right? Now, the reason being is simple. Gentrification, as it stands, is the process of renovating deteriorated urban neighborhoods via an influx of more affluent residents, right? It often forces relocation of current established residents and businesses, and it causes them to move from that gentrified area to seek lower cost housing and stores and etc. Okay? Also, gentrification shifts a neighborhood's racial, ethnic composition and the average household income by developing new, more expensive housing and businesses and improved resources, right? These are things we all know. Now, in order to thwart gentrification efforts, in my opinion, the solution is an economic development model that reflects the indigenous community it sits in, right? This would intrinsically create development that is congruent with the community rather than development that is built on top of or in spite of said community, right? And so when you think about the Black Arts District, if we decide to develop for Black arts in a Black community for Black people, then in my opinion, gentrification is not an issue and is not something we have to worry about because everything that is created will reflect the folks that are already there. And so, that's the first thing, is that I think that creating the Black Arts District could actually pilot this idea. Because in, all the research that I've been looking through for anti-gentrification work, there has been very little evidence of it working in a substantial way. There's very little research about this is what you should do to not be cruddy. And so this would be a piloted idea, yeah? Okay. So the next thing, I want to go back to a metric that we looked at earlier again by the Maryland State Arts Council, okay? So traditional economists calculate arts districts in terms of their economic impact, right? And so if you look here, they're taking they're looking at a few things, right? So first is tax revenue. The second is business profits, right? The third is jobs and wages, and then new dollars, right? How much money do visitors bring in? So if you just look at this metric that was created by the Arts Council, that's exactly what it reflects. The full-time jobs, the state and local taxes, the salaries from the businesses, and then you have a whopping $422 million in visitor spending because they want to see how many what they call new dollars were gained, right? Now, I think that the model is designed to evaluate how arts districts are good for big business, good for government, but not how it's good for community, right? The idea about how it's good for community is not in the equation at all. It's all about how does it benefit the government and how does it benefit these big businesses that may also be in these areas, okay? So I think that we should look at a slightly different model when evaluating the kind of economic impact something like a Black Arts District should have.